Okay. Excellent. Hi, Vic, as well. Right. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Chew Valley Area Forum. My name is Chris Head. I'm Executive Director of the West of England Rural Network, and I'd just like to welcome you all to this evening's forum meeting. The meeting is being recorded, so please just remember that if you don't want to be featured on the video, on the recording, just turn your camera off. If you just remind you to speak, not speak over each other. Can you mute your microphone if you're not speaking? And if you want to ask a question, you can type it into the chat, which is the chat box in the bottom. And if you can just type MIS, which is short for may I speak, and then we'll call you in turn. I will take hands up as well, obviously, as we're going through. Can I just ask you to just tap your name into the chat so that we've got a record of who's on the call? That'd be great. And yeah, the meeting is being recorded, so people can watch it on catch up later if they want to. We have apologies from West Hertfordshire Parish Council, from PC Stuart Peard, from Councillor Sally Davis, from Ben Moss, and from Councillor Karen Warrington. No other apologies at the moment, Sarah? No, okay, thank you.
No, nothing at the moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It says on my notes here, Heather may wish to say a few words about Chew Valley Trail. Did you want to say a few words about Chew Valley Trail, Heather?
Just very quickly, thanks, Chris. I mean, you know much more about this than I do, and probably others know more. But I guess it's just for noting that it was officially opened on May the 18th by the Metro Mayor, Dan Norris. I gather that was a good event. I unfortunately couldn't be there because I was somewhere else quite important, Buckingham Palace actually. But anyway, so it means the whole northern section around the lake is now open, which is about 2.7 kilometres. I'm also aware from Councillor Pritchard that there has been some communication about the chicanes in the road around the lake. And I know that some parish councils in particular have expressed concern that it's a potential sort of hazard spot, particularly the one that's on the end towards Chewstoke Village. I think that's probably it, Chris, unless somebody who was there has more to add to that. Thanks.
No, that's a very accurate report. I can concur with the that. Dan Norris opened it, as well as Councillor Warren from Baines. Jackie, you were there as well, weren't you? I think, yeah. And so it was really nice to see everyone. And in fact, it does link in with the pre-existing trail, which goes from basically almost round by the Blue Bowl. So when the combined total is about 5 kilometres or so now off road. So and we know that it's been very well used as well. Fortunately, Bristol Water put in counters, pedestrian counters from day one, so we'll have a very accurate measure of how many people are actually using it. So as soon as we've got some data, I'll share that back with you if that's okay. I've got nothing else to add on that one at this stage. Anybody else got any comments? Vic?
Yeah, it's just that the chicanes are causing something of a problem on the Chewstoke side.
Yeah.
And the question is it necessary for the first chicane? Because what happens is traffic's sent to one side and it meets ongoing traffic. There's a conflict between the two chicanes. And I've met with engineers on the 2 occasions prior to its completion, yeah, to try and get a resolution to the agricultural vehicles travelling on the dam. They can't pass one another. So whether that's yet to be resolved, it's an ongoing concern.
Okay.
And the third concern is the amount of cones there are from the whole distance right through to Bishop Sutton on both sides of the road that are now growing into the grass.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's done, as I understand, to prevent any parking. And of course, the whole thing, the weakness in the provision of this is there isn't any complementary parking to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and you won't be able to use the Salt and Malt car park because it's a private car park. So that's another problem for Baines to resolve.
I think it was the cones were put up, and it's probably outside of your territory, Ross, but I think the cones were put up particularly for the bank holiday weekends, and I think they've just haven't been taken down. So, but we can raise that with they're Bristol Water cones. They're not actually council cones anyway. So we can raise that with Bristol Water. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Vic. Okay, so Ross, we're joined tonight by PC Ross Cudd. I'm not even sure which station you're from, Ross. I'm not sure where are you at Keynsham?
Yes, so at the Keynsham Civic Centre. Excellent.
Okay, Ross. So you're going to do a quick update for us on action in the Chew Valley.
Okay. Firstly, I'll quickly introduce myself because I'm new to this role. So been a police officer for 23 years at various locations, including London and all over Somerset, and more recently Bath and Keynsham. I think I'm very, very lucky to have the beat that I've been given because it's an absolutely fantastic area, and hopefully I'll be here for the foreseeable future. I know the Sergeant Stu Kumine has sent through a report going into a bit more detail on some of the crimes and things happening from our perspective. I'll focus on some of those. So I can't remember the time period he's put on there now, but he's listed 11 burglaries. I can say that most of those, from what I've seen, are from people's sheds and garages rather than houses. And it's things like mowers and tools being taken. There doesn't appear to be any particular pattern to where they're happening. A lot of them are overnight, but there are also some happening during the day as well. And then likewise, we've got some thefts from work vans. Again, not massive numbers, and they are mostly happening overnight. And that is tools being taken. So you get some high value tools being left in them overnight. With regards to that, I think it's just the usual crime prevention advice to people. Try and keep things locked away securely out of sight if possible. If a scope for fitting alarms to sheds, then try and do so. And just report anything suspicious that people see. That can be done either on 101, or if it's more urgent and you think something's happening at the time, do it on 999. You've probably noticed there have been, over the recent month or so, a lot of drain cover thefts from areas, particularly I've noticed out around Chewstoke, out towards Nemnett Thrubwell. That is it's not just a local issue, it's a national problem. They're taking them for the scrap value and get them weighed in for cash. That was being investigated at a force level rather than locally. I believe that is still being looked at to see whether there's any linked vehicles and suspects. But again, if anyone lives in the areas where there's these drain covers, and it's mostly in the more rural areas where there's not houses overlooking, but if you're out and about at night and you see suspicious vehicles, so it's mainly sort of big transit vans, etc., stopping at the side of roads, try and get a registration number if you can and give us a call. We'll come out and try and stop them. With regards to what we're doing on the beat, so we cover quite a few villages, which I won't list, they're listed on the Sergeant's report, but so I'm new to the role, so I'm still getting to know my way around, but it's good to see that PCSOs, so Martin and Chris, are out highly visible all the time. They've even started doing some more foot patrols now the weather's getting better around the villages, so hopefully people start to see them. We've got regular beat surgeries, which are advertised on our website, so usually at village halls or other suitable locations. We're usually there for an hour. That's just open for anybody to pop in, ask any questions, or just come and say hello. We'll try and give some answers. We've got a really good farm and horse watch scheme running, being a rural area, and the majority of the farms are signed up to that, and they do get regular updates and visits by myself and the PCSOs just to make sure everything's okay. Speed watch as well. there's not as many active speed watch schemes up and running as we'd like at the moment. There is one running in Chew Magna, and I think the others are a work in progress. And I know the PCSOs are currently looking at Chew Stoke to see whether there's enough volunteers to get that one up and running. Because I think speed is always going to be sort of an issue for people, especially through the villages. But people do use them as sort of runs to get to and from work. Don't necessarily stick to
We're losing you again, Ross.
Most of the villages have got. I think from my point of view, hello.
Yeah, that's better.
Yep. Okay, that's probably a good point to say. Are there any sort of questions or issues to be raised from anybody here tonight?
Okay, thanks, Ross. A chair's prerogative. I've got a question, actually. This may be for Jackie and all colleagues in Baines Council. You very kindly put up some signs where these drain manhole covers are, inverted commas, missing. It says manhole covers missing. Could you not put a sign up that says manhole covers stolen? Because actually it implies that you're doing work on it and you just haven't got round to getting your arse in gear to get them put back in again. Like you have missing cat's eyes. They're not missing, they're stolen.
I can take the question back to the transport people. I have to say, I drove down that road recently and didn't see the sign. I wonder what all the problem, wonder what's going on with all the cones. But yeah, I'll pick up the point.
Thank you. We did have a quick question about the speed watch stuff from Chew Stoke Parish Council. I'm not aware that we've got anyone from Chew Stoke Parish Council on the call at the moment. No.
I know that Martin and Chris have responded to them directly, and I think to get some volunteers to get that one up and running.
Okay, thanks, Ross. I noticed that West Hertfordshire has now got a 20-mile-an-hour limit all the way through it as well.
Yeah, yeah. So that one is, yeah, it's just, I think it's normally Stu Peer that covers that, but obviously he's not here tonight. But I have to travel through there during my patrols to get from one part of the beat to the other. So I don't know, I'm not aware of any reports that we've had regarding issues with that one yet. I certainly, when I drive through in the marked car, I try to stick rigidly to all of them just to make people aware, especially when it's the new speed limits.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Any questions from Ross to either answer directly or take back to his colleagues? No, I think you're okay, Ross.
Okay.
Right, thank you very much for joining us, and
Okay.
sorry that you can't get Zoom on your on the proper equipment.
No, we'll try and do something better next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Ross. Cheers then.
Bye.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we've got the update on Ukraine, and we've got, well, Sarah, I think you're going to speak to that as well. And we've also got Sarah Dianco from the Chew Valley Sponsors Network and Anna Wheeler from Bath College. And I'm not quite sure which order you're going to speak in. I guess, Sarah, you're going to go first.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Sarah, and then Anna.
Yeah, if that's okay with everybody. I know Denise is on the call as well, and she's been involved.
Of course.
So we can, Denise can chip in if certainly if I've missed something. But we have got a little presentation, and Sarah's going to follow me to give you a bit of a local flavour about what's happening locally. But I firstly wanted to thank the community, really, because we've been overwhelmed by the support that we've had, not only in the Chew Valley, but right across Baines area, not least from the sponsors putting themselves forward to support the Ukrainian guests, but businesses and community groups all rallying around together to make the Ukrainian journey to the UK as easy as possible. So we're very grateful for your support, and we certainly couldn't do this without you. So again, it feels like it's a rerun of 2020, doesn't it, of the conversation of a thanks, but it's genuinely meant that, you know, thank you again for your support, and that's very much appreciated. And I know Sarah will talk about the fantastic stuff that's happening in the Chew Valley. But I thought it would be useful, I'm just going to call up our presentation that we've done. to give you a bit of a flavour about schemes that are currently in operation, if you weren't aware. So the government, there are two government schemes. There's the Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme and the Ukrainian family visa scheme. So they're two quite distinct schemes. Anybody arriving, individuals or families arriving on those schemes are free to live and work and access public services and benefits in the UK. And for the Baines figures, our figures will be slightly different to Sarah's figures because she's covering a slightly different area. And we're only able to gather information for the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So that's a scheme that the council is responsible for supporting sponsors and their guests. That's not to say that we are not providing services to other Ukrainians on the Ukrainian family visa scheme, but as a council we have a duty to deliver a number of things under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and they're the figures that I've got and have shown here on the slide tonight. So we currently have 130 sponsors and over 300 guests that are now matched, and 83 of those sponsor homes have received guests. So there's quite a large number that are already here, which equals about 179 guests that have arrived so far. And for the Chew Valley, of those guests, we have 18 in our forum area. And that's quite a large number of guests in our area to support. That doesn't mean numbers of people, that means numbers of sponsors. So that's 18 sponsor homes that we have in the Chew Valley area. And for the council, I thought it was worth just explaining what we have to do as a duty to support the Homes for Ukraine scheme. You'll have heard quite a lot on the news about the different schemes, and you'll hear a lot about the thank you payments and the grant for guests. That only relates for the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So those coming on the family support scheme don't get those additional funding. But as a council, we are required to do a number of checks. So when a sponsor is matched to a guest, we're notified by the government, and we have to arrange a accommodation check to ensure that the property is suitable for the guests that are coming to stay. We're also required to undertake DBS checks on all the sponsors within that household for 16 plus. But also after arrival of the guests, we are required to complete some safeguarding checks. So we visit guests in their home and make sure there's no serious welfare concerns and health concerns. And as a council, we are required to provide that ongoing support to guests and their sponsors, and to help with, if there is a breakdown in arrangements, then to help with accommodation issues, ongoing issues, and any other sort of issues that might arise. The funding that comes for this scheme, we are given £200 per guest, and we give that to them on arrival. And the sponsors will receive a £350 thank you payment once a month once all the accommodation checks and all the checks are completed as a thank you payment, and that will be continuous until that arrangement ends. And the area that our team have been involved with right back from April is we were asked to be involved with the welfare checks. We've been, as you know, been involved in the Community Wellbeing Hub here in Peasdown, where I'm currently at the moment. We felt that the Community Wellbeing Hub was a good place for the welfare checks to be carried out, because it enabled us to easily make referrals onto other services where it was needed, particularly for benefit support, housing support, additional funds, mental health support, emotional support. So our team are leading the welfare check team. So there's quite a large team of us now, of about 10 of us, which includes colleagues in the council, also colleagues from HCRG Care Group, and also our colleagues from WERN, our village agents colleagues. So they're also supporting the welfare checks. And so we're bringing a whole range of different teams together to support those checks. We're organising those welfare checks as soon as reasonably possible after the guests arrive. And we believe that we're going a bit above and beyond what perhaps other authorities are doing, where we are not just only checking to make sure the guests arrive safely and there's no immediate concerns, but we're making sure that they understand what services are available here, the health services, linking up with schools, and the emotional support, and providing money, benefits, advice, and signposting to organisations like obviously our Chew Valley groups, but also our Bath Welcomes Refugees, who are commissioned to support the council. And we're very keen to link up with the local support, and we've been working with Sarah for a number of weeks now. One of the things we're trying to do as well, because we realise that, you know, whilst we go in and do a welfare visit, it's really important that we continue to maintain a relationship with the sponsors and guests. We will be doing some follow-up visits with guests once they've settled in for a number of months, and we'll be going back to see if things have changed or where they're at, whether they've got employment or whether they need to find other support. So we'll be looking to arrange that. We'll be looking to do our first follow-up visits very shortly, actually, because it's been a couple of months now since the first couple of people have arrived. But the Community Wellbeing Hub we're making sure that people are signposted to the Community Wellbeing Hub so that we can easily signpost people to the support services that they require. And we're also, as a council, commissioning organisations, as I mentioned, Bath Welcomes Refugees. We're also commissioning Bath Mind, CAB, and other providers as well to provide that additional support, because we appreciate that a lot of these organisations are stretched themselves, and it's making sure that we provide that a little additional support that people can give to our guests. We're also looking to organise some hosted events with sponsors and guests, and we held our first virtual event last night, which was well attended, and we want to continue to maintain that ongoing communication with them to ensure that we're dealing with issues and we're responding to concerns and challenges, and have an opportunity for us to talk together collectively, you know, and for guests and sponsors to meet each other. We have recently set up a dedicated newsletter, so that will be going out quite regularly to sponsors and guests. We're finding out lots of things as we go on our visits. Sponsors are telling us about offers that are made available. We're also trying to keep guests and sponsors updated about updated information from the government. So our newsletter will be a way of communicating that regularly. One thing you might be aware of, and it'd be really good if you could help promote it when it's available, is we will be setting up a grant scheme. As you may have heard in the news, that every council will get an allowance for each individual guest of, I think it's 10,500. So we're using some of those funds to pay for the commission services, but also looking to set up a grant scheme so that we will enable local groups to apply for support for Ukrainian guests. And that could be an issue, particularly in the Chew Valley, is around transport. So that could be that people apply to that grant funding for transport to solve some of the transport issues. And as a council, we are keeping our website up to date for people, and that's the link to the website. I think that's the end of my slides. I think, yes, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to talk to you about what's happening locally, because there's some fantastic work that's happened locally.
Thank you, Sarah. I thought I'd start with a picture of the Chew Valley, if you can see it, together with our goal of the network, which is absolutely about recognising both the pluses and the minuses of living in the Chew Valley. Number one, it's an amazing place to be, so beautiful to be here. But equally, in order, we all recognised, all the people who kind of thought about whether they wanted to sponsor and what they wanted to do, recognised that the challenge to ensure that actually Ukrainians flourished and are not isolated was huge. And so one of the first things we needed to do was actually build a really supportive community network. That was our goal from the start. Thank you, Sarah. If I can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So who are we? We are the Chew Valley Ukrainian Support Network. We started on March the 14th, 4 days before the opening of the government scheme, but obviously it had been trailed in the press, with a kind of Facebook post, which was put onto just a couple of village Facebooks pages. Basically, anybody else thinking of sponsoring? And if so, shall we form a network? Well, it's mushroomed since then. We stretch from Dundry in the north to Lytton and Shipham in the south, from Cleve to the west, and Marksbury and Farrington Gurney in the east. We kind of cover the same sort of area as, by sheer coincidence actually, as defined by the Chew Valley Gazette, which is quite fortunate. So they're kind of, very interested in letting all their readers know what on earth is going on, because we're pretty identical. And clearly one of the challenges of that, as anybody who's lived in the area knows and wants to do something based in the valley, is one of the challenges, which I don't mention here, is of course that means we are either cover or a bang next door to 4 administrative organisations: Baines, North Somerset, Somerset and Bristol. And people's focus is not necessarily always, particularly when it comes to employment, within the administrative area in which they operate, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a network, because there's so many problems about boundary issues when it comes to funding and all of those other things. And so if you can have a network that covers the whole area, which locally people see as one area, then actually you can maybe build that bridge and maybe facilitate things happening across boundaries, which otherwise might not happen. And interestingly enough, one of the things that we have done with that is actually facilitate replacing a family who were in North Somerset. So this is not a Baines issue, but they were in North Somerset, but they wanted to go to Bristol. So if we'd actually left it only to North Somerset, then they wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have been so complicated. But luckily, we were able to facilitate that solution, which is what the Ukrainian family wanted. Anyway, a bit more about us. 52 sponsors are involved in our network. Already, we've got 25 Ukrainian families already here, of which, as Sarah mentioned, 18 are in Baines. 8 more families are in the pipeline. I can't actually recall how many of those are in Baines, but 8 are in the pipeline and 14 are still looking. We've got a few people on hold for various sort of family reasons they can't sponsor at the moment. A lot of the reason those people are on hold is because we've had to change and we've had to recognise the challenges within the valley, primarily about primary school places. Education has driven the kind of pause in our network of actually finding families, because we began to realise quite early on that we were running out of school places, particularly at primary school level, and therefore maybe we needed to gather some data and and be a bit more targeted. And now we are actually going back out to the contacts with Ukrainian families to actually change what we're after, what the remaining people are after, and primarily we're moving away from children and more towards adults. The second bit of our network is not just the sponsors, it's all the people who've stepped forward in the Chew Valley offering help. and there are a huge number, as you can see, 66. Out of those 66 people, we realized that actually, in order to help Ukrainians integrate and be really part of, interact with all the services, they actually needed some help, and so did sponsors, because, the bulk of the sponsors, for example, if you take something like jobs and money, the jobs and money area, which is initially primarily dominated by needing to understand how to claim universal credit. The vast majority of the people who are sponsoring haven't actually ever done that. And so many aspects of this, a lot of the people who are sponsoring are empty nesters, for example. The last time they applied for a school place for their children was decades ago. So, there are all sorts of challenges, not just for the Ukrainians, but also for the sponsors. So what we did was that we chopped up the task, identified the various subject areas that people needed to know a bit more about, sponsors in particular, and we appointed subject coordinators who are from obviously the volunteers on those subject matters that you can see: health, education, jobs, money, social, transport, and language, key issues. And we also then developed an information hub. Now, this information hub is a private website. As I mentioned at the beginning, the crucial thing is connection. And in order to connect with people, you've actually got to have some of their details. How could you connect otherwise? Which is why, instead of doing what a lot of areas have done, which is create a Facebook page, which is public, pretty public thing to do, we've actually created a private website where we actually have people's, not all the details, but we've got sponsor details, names and contact numbers, and the ages and the sexes of the Ukrainian children that are here, because primarily people want to connect their children. Yes, they want to connect with other Ukrainian adults, but they want their children. So we needed to have a method of actually identifying where all the 11-year-olds were in the valley, Ukrainians, so they could basically get together. And this private website, it actually has a network map, and I'll show you a little picture in a sec. So it shares some details and provides lots of information under those topic areas and identifies what's on. And what I mean by what's going on in the Tube Valley, what activities are available to Ukrainians for free, what other things are going on, which are perhaps timely, like all the Jubilee celebrations and so on and so forth. And also a whole range of sponsor guidance, which covers all the things like visa applications, how to do it, biometric residence permits, how you make sure your Ukrainians go for that, all the other kinds of things that to support the sponsors in the way of helping. Anyway, let me just show you the next slide, which I won't talk about.
I want to be able to bring in Alison, and can we sort of speed it up, or can we bring in Alison, or?
I could. This is my penultimate slide.
Thank you. Okay.
And I'll be 2 secs. Okay, that just gives you just to show you. I don't expect you to read all the detail. You won't be able to see it, but that's the map, and each of those little blobs is a clickable link with somebody who's either there, which is a flag, or they're in the pipeline, a yellow circle, or a blue circle. It means they're still looking, to give people an idea of where everybody is. Along the top, you can see all the things we offer, although you can't read it, but they're basically subject areas. If I move to the last slide, Sarah, please. Okay, how do we connect? Connection is vital. We have set up WhatsApp groups for sponsors and for helpers. The Ukrainians, we facilitated the Ukrainians connecting with each other, and they've now got their own WhatsApp group, as have the Ukrainian teenagers. We're now setting up village transport WhatsApp groups so we can tackle the problem. We have a whole variety of ways of meeting, but one in particular is the Friday weekly Ukrainian Community Hub held at Bishop Sutton Village Hall, which includes English lessons, lunch, clothes exchanges, kids craft. Our challenges, we've mentioned transport. The issue is very much social, but it's also about jobs, Also childcare. The Ukrainians have a very different system, very cheap childcare, and everybody expects to have it. So they're really quite shocked at the expense in this country and the difficulty associated with not having childcare if you want to get a job. So that's a big challenge, and how we're going to do it, I don't know. School places and transport, a big problem. Also in Baines, we can get places, but there seems to be a challenge about no spare places on buses. So we need to tackle that. And the final point I'd like to make, which is a challenge, is some sponsors, the cracks are beginning to show, fraying edges, and we're now developing a sponsor support package of sort of facilitated self-support sessions. That's it.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Anna, did you want to come in briefly?
Yeah, I mean, I think my bit is really brief. So so I'm here, yes, Bath College, but also as the Baines holder of the Community Learning Pot, which means it's the not-for-profit offer of the AEB that comes across the county. So we've got a fairly established ESOL provision. We are not looking to step on anyone's toes, but to complement what is already out there. So I think that we are working with some of the groups. We work very closely with Izzy and Alice at Bath Welcomes Refugees. So we're mainly going through them to offer opportunities, but we can put on bespoke provision. Over the summer at Summer Valley campus in Radstock, we are doing family learning sessions every Wednesday throughout August. So that'll be led by an arts engagement tutor and an ESOL tutor. It will be a chance for people to have a look around the campus and see what facilities there are as well. If there's any teenagers or any post-19s that want to further their training there, it's a really nice way to get to know the campus. Basically, all post-19 provision for anyone coming through sponsorship or family scheme is free of charge. There is a wide range of not just language provision. Yes, we can do language provision. Anyone that wants to, we've hijacked all of the initial assessment sessions until September. Every Wednesday, there are initial assessment sessions for anyone that wants to come find out what level of language they're currently operating at and what we've got available. So there'll be formal classes from September. In the meantime, we'll respond to demand and put on basically conversation classes to get people started. So we can put that on. It does not have to be delivered from Bath College. It can be delivered in venues in exactly the same way as we deliver the chew and chat cookery sessions. We can come out and about. We do ask that there is a group of 7 or 8 people, but we will then do our best to accommodate. We are working with, we've got 3 or 4 of the 16 to 18 year olds that are coming through looking at doing their full-time compulsory ed with the college in September, and we'll support them with the language and the provision there. So that is a pathway for the folk that may not want to go to sixth form and want to come and do vocational. So again, come through Bath College for that. I've given a couple of flyers that can be distributed with contacts. So we've kept it as simple as possible. And I think the other thing to remember is that people coming on to the post-19 provision, it's not just the training. We can also support with travel costs and childcare costs. So anyone that is on universal credit or fits into the low wage criteria, which is about 18 grand a year income, is entitled to have that level of support with the travel costs and childcare provision. So there is additional support. I just wanted to make it really clear it wasn't just ESOL. There's a huge amount of stuff around CV building, employability, sector-based work academies and boot camps that are intensive programs, anywhere between 2 and 12 weeks to help somebody move into work really rapidly. So upskill, meet the employers, get the interviews, you're there with industry. And again, it's all under the adult ed budget, so it's all free of charge. That's me.
Thanks, Anna. So happy to take any, well, I'm happy to direct any questions to Sarah or Anna, to Sarah. There was a bit of a comment, I think, Ian, you made a comment about the transport, and transport, to be honest with you, seems to be a theme that runs through everything. So like you just said, Anna, it's great that we've got all these classes and stuff like that, but actually, despite people being paid for transport costs, there's actually still the practicalities of transport and how that all works. So I don't know if anybody else has got any other questions, either for Sarah or Anna or Sarah. You can either raise your real hand or a virtual hand. No. Okay. So any thoughts about transport? Because it does seem that that's one of the biggest blockers, both in education and in employment, and actually getting access to benefit and all the financial services as well. So, and I know that Denise has been working with Chew Valley Community Transport to try and get some solutions, but there's more. It's more longer term, I think, especially given that some of the families have been with their host for 3 months already, 2 or 3 months, and they're only going to be technically there for 6 months, I think, isn't it? So it's sort of where do they go further on? Denise, you're going to answer my question, aren't you, rather than ask a question?
Find the right button. Now, just to say that yes, we've gone through phase 1 with lots of people arriving, and already, as Sarah mentioned, there are a few cracks that are showing. So with some families, the village agents and myself are working with sponsor hosts to start the conversations about what's going to happen beyond the 6 months. Now, some situations are okay; they're in separate accommodation, and that's more sustainable. But for some, it's less so. So already we're trying to help at least one lot of people move on to other accommodation, and that's across the whole of Baines. So the main thing is that. Well, we've all seen the news. It's not going to be over by Christmas, so it's going to be. And there's, some of them haven't got anything to go back to. So of course we'll keep continuing this, but longer term it has to be sustainable. And everything that the support network are doing is, as usual, is incredible and incredibly vital, because without those small acts of compassion and kindness, none of this would really be viable, to be honest, alongside all the statutory stuff as well. But it's really, really important that people feel they shouldn't have to feel grateful all the time. They've all come here to work and be productive and contribute, as well as not be bombed. So it's great to have them here.
Thanks, Denise. So there was a question in the chat from Ian and Sandy. Sarah, I think you've answered that. Most people telling us they're living in cities. They tell us public transport is very good in Ukraine and cheaper. Well, that's not a big surprise.
No,
That's the low bar has been set. Sarah, you wanted to come in, and then I'm going to close this one down, and we're going to go over to Jackie. So Sarah, and then I'm
just on a positive note, one of the biggest challenges that everybody's had is this whole business of appointments and universal credit and having to go to job centres. And I just wanted to share with you that the job centre it's fingers crossed, but the job centre in Bishopsworth, which is what the bulk of the people in our area go to, they have recognised that it's also in their interests, and we're in discussions. We're just about, I'm hoping it's going to happen, to agree that they're going to reschedule everybody so that we can actually put a minibus on to take everybody, so that we don't have all these cars going up on different times and everybody going berserk. And I was saying to the manager there, because she said it's quite a problem in the Chew Valley, this transport. And I said, yes. I said, well, maybe what we should do is think about doing it not just for the Ukrainians, but everybody else who has to sign on in the Chew Valley. Yes, she said. So fingers crossed, we might be building for the future.
So look, Sarah, thanks very much for that, because you've just segued into Jackie's item anyway, I think. But I just want, before we go to Jackie, just wanted to say thank you, Sarah, for all that you guys are doing. I've been in discussion with David Tonkin as well. I know there's a real network of you down in Chew Valley, and thank you very much for all the work you're doing. Sarah, thanks for the work you're doing as well on leading it. I know Denise is doing some brilliant work, so thanks, Denise, and Anna, thank you for the work you're doing on that. And I think if we keep this as a bit of an update, and if anybody's got any comments, we'll come back to you. But also, Alison, you're going to send out the flyers, I think, aren't you, with the notes? Thanks very much, Alison. Okay, right, we're running shortly back with a few minutes behind, but I do know that we can catch up some minutes at the end, so that's okay. So I'm still finishing at 7:30. Jackie, over to you.
Chris, and thanks for inviting me here to speak this evening. I was just making some similar notes for myself as what Sarah was reflecting on there. It's really interesting to see some of these issues that present for everybody sort of tackled in microcosm through the Ukrainian project, and it'd be interesting to sort of see the learning. But I'll start at the beginning. I'm here to talk about place-based working, and I've got a few slides that I'll share to sort of introduce the concept, and also just some slides highlighting some of the work that's going on in different parts of the council that's got a bearing on place. And then I'd like to kind of hear from you, but I thought it might be helpful first to introduce myself. So my name is Jackie Clayton. I am Head of Green Transformation in Baines. I work in a job share with Louise Morris, so I work Monday to Wednesday, she works Wednesday to Friday, and you can contact us at any time on the same jackielouise.jobshare email address. Green Transformation is a new service within the council, so tackling the twin challenges of the climate and ecological emergencies is one of the top 2 priorities for Baines. And so just to explain my day job, it's about bringing together and building on existing work that the council was doing on climate change, sustainability and green infrastructure, championing leading change across the council and more widely, scaling up action on decarbonisation of buildings and energy, and driving action on nature recovery. So that's my day job. I've been in post for less than 2 months, so I'm still very much getting to know Bath and North East Somerset, and so please be patient with me. But I'm really pleased that in that time I've been able to get out and about in the Chew Valley on 3 occasions, and I have to say it's been a highlight of some of my experience to date. I think based on that short experience, the sun always seems to shine in the Chew Valley, and it's been great to sort of see the projects there and start to meet some people in the area. So that's me. I'm going to try and share a screen to share some slides with you, if I can find my right. Hopefully, is that working to see the slide? It doesn't seem to be. Yeah. Okay, everyone see? Yeah, thank you. So I'm here to talk about place-based working, what it is and why we're doing it. So if the climate and ecological emergencies and tackling those is one of 2 priorities for the council, the other one is giving people a bigger say. And I think this work around this initiative around place-based working kind of fits within that space. Fundamentally for me, I think it's about listening to people in the different parts of Bath and North East Somerset, and helping to give places a stronger voice within discussions and conversations at senior officer level within the council. So I think at the heart that's what it's about. It's not replacing the really important role that councillors play as advocates for place within the council, but it is kind of like a route into different sorts of conversations. So it's really about sort of strengthening our understanding, the senior officers, of the different places in Baines. So we've got a more rounded understanding of what it feels like to be there and what needs and priorities are, and helping us to join things up better within the council in terms of the plans and the initiatives that we run. So how does it work? I think it's important to say it's a new idea that we are trying out, so we're very much learning. I'm not sure if people can see all the writing on this slide, because for me the face is obscure some bit, but place-based teams, the initiative is sort of driven and led by Sophie Broadfield, who's the Director of Sustainable Communities, and each area forum area within Baines has got an identified place team lead, which is drawn from Sophie's senior leadership team. You can see the names for the different areas there. Louise and I have responsibility for leading on rural area forum areas. So I've taken a lead for the Chew Valley, and Louise will lead on Bathavon. Do feel free to speak to either of us. The place-based working is a new approach, and there's not a set model for how we do it. So what sits beneath this kind of senior point of contact, if you like, is to be developed. And I think it's really important that we learn from you about what you want, rather than us just coming and suggesting this is how we think it should work. And particularly given that Louise and I have just joined Baines, we want to start by asking you what it is you want, and then think about how we can best respond. I think I'd just sort of say it's important to be clear, this is not a new set of teams, there's not a great army of people standing behind me to work on this, and it doesn't replace the existing relationships and conversations that you have with different people in the council. But it's about how we can make what we've got work better for you. So in summary, the kind of objectives around listening, understanding, building relationships, and better aligning our plans and projects to your needs in the Chew Valley, and thinking about how we can do things differently and how we can do them better based on what we've got. I think my observations or my first impressions from what I've gleaned going out and looking at some of the transport issues that you've got in the Chew Valley, looking at some of the development, the landscape and the conservation issues that there are there, and talking to people, is that it's not only a beautiful area, but I think it's very rich in terms of the kind of community infrastructure you've got. It feels quite self-sufficient, and like, you know, you make things happen by yourself. So I don't want to try and cut across any of that, but just listen to you about what you're doing. So in a minute, I'd like to kind of come to the question and hear from you about what are your priorities, what are the issues that you'd like us to deal with better from a Chew Valley perspective. And I'll come back to that at the end, but I thought it might just be helpful to speak briefly about a few highlights of work that's ongoing in different parts of our Sustainable Communities Directorate in particular, that are of interest from a place perspective. So I'll just talk briefly about some of the projects in climate and nature, transport and planning that we've got on. I'll start with my area. So within the climate and nature teams, we have a number of green infrastructure projects that we run across veins, and that started with work on the Avon corridor and around Bathscape, but it's something that we're keen to do more broadly across other parts of the area. And so Chew Valley Reconnected is a sort of an area of work we're looking to develop sort of landscape scale green infrastructure projects. So far we've had what you've already spoken about this evening, the opening of the northern section of the recreational trail around the lake. And the first priority, and something we're working on at the moment, is unlocking the funding to get the rest of that trail done, and to sort of really think about how we can make the most of that for habitats and nature, as well as the access. So that's something where we're looking at funding, but we want to go beyond that and then think about how we can invest more, sort of bring in more funding to support nature recovery across the area, joining it with an initiative called the Big Chalk, which kind of connects a band of landscapes, chalk and limestone landscapes across southern England. So that's a sort of interesting area. It's a watch this space because the funding's not there yet, but that's something that we hope to work on more. I wasn't going to say a lot about the kind of energy and renewable energy and energy efficiency things. I know Michaela is on the call now, and she's been working closely with various parishes in the Chew Valley. Michaela, if you want to say anything at this point, please feel free to chip in. But what I was just going to say is we are looking to develop our energy strategy over the next year or so, and particularly thinking about community renewables. We're also working closely with WECA on a retrofit accelerator, which is about how we can get more retrofitting of homes for energy efficiency happening. And I think that there is interest that I'm aware of amongst Chew Valley villages in that. So those are areas we might work on more. The other pillar of our work on climate, as well as energy and building retrofit, is transport. So I'll just turn to transport issues. I think we've got a lot of work that's being led by WECA on transport, and I think it'd be interesting to hear from you how easy you find it to engage with work at a WECA level. I know that the Sustainable Transport Working Group supporting this forum is actively involved in discussing with the council and also with WECA colleagues this Somer Valley to Bristol and Bath Transport Corridor study, which WECA are looking to move forward. That's very focused around improving public transport connections, bus routes along the A37. And I know that there's interest in how we kind of get the benefits of that out into the rest of the Chew Valley, the villages that aren't served by those strong bus connections of that route. But WECA is working on the strategic outline the outline business case for funding to take that forward. And I think we can expect some further consultation in the autumn later this year, which I'm sure people will be closely involved with. Also thinking about transport and climate, there's a study that WECA has been working on looking at transport decarbonisation. There's not a lot on this in the public domain at the moment, but it will come out because it's going to form an important part of the evidence supporting the next joint local transport plan. So it's just something to look out for when that becomes public. And it's important because we know transport is one of the kind of the key sticking areas where it's very difficult to get a reduction in carbon emissions. And we know that the existing joint local transport plans, I think we're on JLT 4 at the moment, probably won't get us to carbon neutrality by 2030. So WECA will need to be working on JLTP 5 in common with all other transport authorities across the country. So the Levelling Up white paper early this year set an expectation that all transport authorities would provide updated local transport plans by the end of 2024. So there'll be consultation happening on that, and we expect it to take place next year. This is just putting on the radar some of the things which will be of interest, because I know transport's obviously a really key issue for people in the villages in the valley. So those are some of the things that are coming forward. Moving on from transport to planning, people may be aware that we've recently we've been working on a partial update to our local plan, so focusing on some of the policies within the existing plan. There's been past consultation on that. We're currently at examination, and we're hoping to adopt the partial update later this year. That focuses on some changes to supplementary planning documents, particularly around climate, so standards for net zero buildings, and thinking about how we can make sure, proposals to get electric vehicle charging points into new development, and how we can have a more holistic approach to renewable energy development, so they deliver benefits to the communities and for nature alongside. So that's just some of the changes that are happening in terms of the local plan partial update this year. But as well as that, we're working on the longer term updates to local plans. So people, I'm sure, have been involved in these before, and you'll know that it's a very lengthy process with a lot of engagement involved in it. So this is just to sort of put on the radar, if it's not already there, that we expect to launch work on the full refresh of the local plan later this year in the autumn, and that's with a view to getting a draft plan by 2024, so that it'll come into force from 2025. So it's a kind of a 3-year project, but it'll mean a lot of engagement with communities, and I think it'd be interesting to sort of hear from you how you want to engage with that.
Jackie,
Final one of these slides.
Got a couple of minutes. Can you?
Yep. Absolutely. The final one is just a nod to the fact that our interest doesn't stop at the boundaries of Baines, and so just to be aware, if you're not already, that the North Somerset local plan, which may have implications across border, is they're slightly further ahead with their local plan development because they're not linked in with the kind of the WECA process. They are expecting to go back out to consultation in November. So officers in the council are very closely involved in looking at neighbouring plans, at any implications for Baines, but it's something else that that people might want to think about or comment on. So those are just some of the things I was going to highlight. But really, what I wanted to come back to, I'm happy to pick up on any issues that I've mentioned at a later date. But it would be really good to come back to hearing from you what you'd like to get out of place-based working, and what your kind of challenges or expectations of me are. Thanks, Chris.
That's great. Thanks, Jackie, and thanks for rushing you there at the end. Sorry for rushing you at the end. Those questions, I'm wondering whether actually, rather than having a sort of people commenting on now, we can put them. We'll send them out in the notes. Alison, is that okay? And then people can respond to that, because I think there's some you've touched on some really meaty issues in all of that, and I think you're right that we are fairly self-reliant down here. That's a good thing. It's also a bad thing, I think. and actually we do get on and do stuff, but that's sort of almost sometimes despite of rather than because of. But also, and again, the good that you pointed out about the North Somerset one, as Sarah pointed out at the beginning in her bit about the Ukrainian, when we were talking about the Ukrainian guests, actually we border North Somerset, we border Bristol, we border Somerset, and actually, you know, the amount of stuff that looks towards Bath is actually fairly light, to be honest with you. So it's actually quite important, and it's really good that we've got a named person like yourself to be able to take this forward at a place-based level. So I don't, anybody's got, there've been a few comments. Oh, sorry, Michaela's put some stuff up in the chat about the climate and nature emergency, but maybe, you know, maybe we could have a bit more of a focused workshop on some of the stuff later. Is that okay? I'm sorry to rush you, but I wanted to bring in Helen, which is important because again, this is another part of the work that we do is around the healthcare side of things. So is that okay? Colleagues happy to respond to Jackie separately? But you're very welcome to spend as much time down here as you want, Jackie, as well. Okay, great. Helen.
Thank you. Hello, evening, everyone.
You're right.
I just wondered whether we could just hold off on the slides for a moment.
Yeah.
And I just felt it was just right for me to start with a bit of a vaccination programme update. I'm sure you'd be interested to hear that, because we are actually coming to the end of this latest wave of vaccinations. So I don't think it's the end of the end, but you know, it's another phase behind us. And within Three Valleys Health, so that's the 9 practices in North East Somerset, we will have delivered, bit of a drum roll here, nearly 80,000 vaccines. So it's just a phenomenal effort. And also that hasn't meant that the day jobs shut down. You know, it's also been incredibly busy at the front line in primary care. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who's on the call that either stepped forward to have their jab with us or has actually supported, because we had, you know, around 90 supporters at one stage at the Soma Centre, patient navigators, and people marshalling the car park, and just, you know, generally good people in our community that wanted to support that effort. So absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, I'm not one to be competitive, but I have to say that we were in this area, we were top on overall uptake. So 94.8% of our patients had a jab. And also we were top performing in terms of volumes within Baines as a collective. So I'm very proud of that. And I've had lots of sleepless nights, but it, you know, it's all come good in the end. And I hope that people have felt really protected and supported by their GP surgeries.
That's great.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Now, if I can go to the slides, I can see Sarah's sharing. Thank you very much. So, do I need to do anything? No, it's going to come up. Is that right? Yeah, there we are. Okay. So
yeah, everybody can see that.
Lovely. Thank you. We'll start with number 1. Actually, just to say that I'm actually attending the Somer Valley Forum tomorrow. So this is a pincer approach to speak to you all, to talk to you about our plans. So I'm really delighted to be here today. And actually just picking up on what Ross Cudd said, you know, I feel really privileged to be working in this community as well. And I think you know, to be working on healthcare with an opportunity to make a difference, although it's been tough through the pandemic, you know, it's been great job satisfaction. And, you know, after hearing from some of you this evening, I'm sure you feel the same. It's worthy work, isn't it? Right, okay, so a quick whistle stop through what is a primary care network and who we are, but then I'll kind of get on to the nitty gritty of it, but I wanted everyone to be up to a certain speed. So PCNs, as we call them, established in 2019, and they are basically groups of GP surgeries working together. So we're not merged or federated, we're all still 9 independent practices, but we're working together at scale where it makes sense. And at the moment for us, you know, that absolutely means bottom right there, close links with our community, but also employing a range of extra staff through some additional funding that's come through from NHS England to support and shore up life in general practice. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So who we are in terms of geography. So I've just put a little map on there. We're 11 GP sites across rural northeast Somerset. That's 9 contracts. And you can see that practices there generally work in groups of 3. So we've got Chads, Somerton and Westfield, Chew, Hartree and St Mary's, and then Elm Hayes, Hope House and Hillcrest over in Peasdown St John. So I guess edge to edge, we're about 40 minutes from each other, which in itself presents a challenge in terms of shared working and hub working, because obviously we have to think about being rural, and presenting patients with a hub model might not actually be very good for patient access. So I think, you know, lots of our services need to be about thinking about patient access and what's best for patients, but also what's better for us if we feel that there is an opportunity to work at scale. Next slide. Okay, so just the numbers about us really. So within that area that I've just described, that's around 68,000 patients. So in terms of scale, we're the 2nd largest PCN in Baines, Swindon and Wiltshire. And many of you will know that we're working at that scale now. So Baines is our locality, but obviously BSW is the CCG level. And that clinical commissioning group is to move to an integrated care system from July. So I think the big thing for me is that PCN working gives us a really collective, loud voice for rural and semi-rural GPs in our area. And I think historically, Chris will nod, you know, we've often felt the poor relations to our Bath colleagues. So I think when we were working in Baines locality, it was really helpful to be a stronger voice, and now even more so working across the likes of Baines, Swindon and Wiltshire. So you can see there we've got 24 PCNs in BSW, and we are the 2nd largest in that setup. So I'm really pleased to have that strong voice. Dr. Liz Hirsch is our clinical director. She's also a partner at St Chad's, and our board meets regularly. We talk about PCN strategy and how we can make a difference to patients' lives. We've also got an experienced senior nurse clinical steering group. So they were the engine room behind the setup at the Sona Centre in terms of governance. And that work is continuing in terms of, you know, what can that nurse group do to better support practices. We've got an additional PCN workforce. So as I was saying earlier, access to NHS funding, talk about that in a minute. And we're underpinned by a proper legal network agreement to put that working on a more formal footing. But actually our PCN, we're thinking about taking the next step to incorporate so that we can actually work effectively as a shared service centre and commission services. So, you know, if you think about the recent announcement with the, you know, Virgin and HCRG and that contract not continuing from 2014, you know, potentially that gives us some opportunity to think, well, what could we commission locally? That feels a bit scary at the moment, but, you know, we've got a couple of years to think about how we could potentially work on models like that with your support. Next slide, thank you. Right, so in terms of the staff that we've recruited to date at the PCN, well, even through a global pandemic, we've managed somehow to recruit 23 extra staff. So that's 7 employed by our GP Federation, that's Baines Enhanced Medical Service, and also 16 practice employed people. And, you know, it's going to be no surprise to you to understand that they are intending to reduce high levels of workload, stabilise where we are at the moment, work at scale where we make sense, and ultimately improve the quality of care to our local populations. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd just break that down for you. So at the moment, we've got 55% of that workforce are pharmacists. So we've got clinical pharmacists and pharmacy techs supporting GP workload on things, for example, hospital discharges and medicine reviews. We've got 14% of that pot, funding pot, on care coordinators, and they have really hit the ground running. So people that have got all sorts of life skills and experience, helping to support GPs with signposting and generally putting their arms around patients where we just haven't had the opportunity or time to do that in the past. So that's been fantastic. We have 3 social prescribers now across our groups. That's 8% of that funding. And they are working across the 3 groups of 3 that I mentioned earlier. We've got a first contact physio, and we've got 17% of that budget to be confirmed. So at the moment, we are in the throes of recruiting a nurse associate, which is a bit of sort of between a healthcare and assistant and a registered nurse role. Some more care coordinators, because we recognise they make such a difference, and also perhaps some physicians associates to closely support our GPs. And in fact, most of our practices are teaching practices, so they're used to having Bristol Uni medical students shadow them. So we feel that we're in a really good place to also support this new type of physician's associate, where it makes sense to do so, and where we are actually struggling to recruit a GP, that could be a workable solution. So what are we looking to do for the future? Well, we want to hone our plans to continue to support and develop the workforce above there, and also just really to make sure that we've got the best skill mix, so that we are supporting our practice colleagues. And that NHS funding increases year on year, so we will be able to continue to hone that workforce to support primary care. We're also concerned a little bit, I've got for the future there on the slide, about practice estates, because it's all very well recruiting extra people. We've got to find somewhere for them to sit and for them to see patients where necessary. So our new integrated care system has come up with a plan and a toolkit, which, to be frank, I haven't had much time to look at yet, but it's just been released, and there will be some workshops to enable us to effectively work out how we can develop our estates to make sure that we can accommodate an expanding team. And I need to be personally a bit careful about that, because obviously, estates is also a practice matter, and we've got GP partners owning those practices. So, we've got to think quite carefully about how we can offer a nice working environment to those staff, and somewhere to sit and somewhere to work, but also be creative. And we've got discussions happening with our IT team about more laptops to enable some more flexible working from home and all of that kind of stuff. So, as with all businesses, we've got to think flexibly about our bricks and mortar. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things that I really wanted to hear from you on today was NHS England's plans for enhanced access. So they have recently reached out to primary care to say that they would like us to provide a minimum of 60 minutes of appointments per 1,000 patients based on our adjusted patient population as at the 1st of January. So for us, the detail on that is 66,956 patients, and that works out as having to provide an extra 67 hours a week of service to our patients. And obviously, unless we think really carefully about this and creatively, it's not going to happen. That's a really tall ask. But we obviously recognise that we want to tap into some extra funding and be really careful and creative about how we give that extra support to patients. So we've got some ideas, and those are the things that I wanted to run past you. And we've got to do all of this to begin in October of this year. And as I put there, you know, we're already stretched and recovering from a pandemic. So I think, you know, what we do from October might not necessarily look like what we are doing from year 2 and beyond, when we've perhaps got a bit more momentum behind us and a few more staff through the additional roles reimbursement scheme. So we are thinking about providing some more early morning appointments, particularly for working people, and that might be, you know, bloods or women's health appointments, Saturday mornings and or evening doctor and nurse appointments, and that could be face-to-face, it could be telephone calls. We are currently developing an e-consultations platform, working with our IT teams to do that. So we will have that available for October. So we need to, you know, make sure that patients are aware of that channel and staff that up, turn that tap on, if you like. And also we want to be more flexible with our current PCN workforce. So I was saying earlier, the clinical pharmacists, the physios and the care coordinators, you know, potentially we can give some more later evening access to those healthcare professionals if that suits patients. We're also thinking about group consultations for chronic disease management or long-term conditions like asthma and diabetes. And that's where we get patients together, perhaps during the evening or, you know, at other times to suit. And actually we've got premises like in Elm Hayes and also the new build at Hope House that would be ideal for these kind of things. And actually Hope House will have access to a kitchen area even, so that we can provide, you know, cooking clubs to patients and think about, you know, how we can teach, bring in people from council specialties to teach patients to cook meals for low cost, you know, think really tangible things like that. And also we've got quite a few GPs that are specialty in women's health services. So we're thinking we could run some particular women's health group sessions that might be really helpful. So that's kind of the practice-based stuff that we could do. And we're thinking that that probably would be 30 minutes of our allocation per 1,000. And then the other 30 minutes provision, we would look to our federation to run that for us. So on the same lines of the service that's running at Poulton at the moment in Elm Hayes, we would run that improving access evening service and weekends across 1 or 2 sites. So probably Elm Hayes and probably Hope House, but that's to be confirmed. And also, some of you may or may not know that we run a home visiting service as well with paramedics in our patch. And we would like to continue to run that with the funding that we get from Enhanced Access. So lots of ideas at the moment. We've got to produce a plan for the CCG or the ICS to confirm by the end of July. And then rollout will be from October this year. So, you know, one of the reasons that I'm interested in engaging with you is for you to give feedback in due course about these sorts of things, and also open to your ideas on how we can deliver. And I think that's it on my slides. So I'll come back to you all now, if that's okay.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Helen. Just a very quick question for me. Is there a 3 Valleys Care patient participation group, or is it, are you still operating on the surgery, individual surgery patient participation groups?
A bit of both, actually, Chris. So we've got participation groups in practices. Some are more active than others. And also we have a patient forum, and the leader of that is Jenny Evans, who is also involved in the St Chad's patient participation group. So I would like to develop that for the future. And in fact, it's on my to-do list to speak to Denise, because we also said about reaching out to the workforce that helped us, the voluntary workforce that helped us at the Soma Centre.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, and this is with all due respect to my esteemed colleagues on the call today, we're fairly depleted on numbers. And actually, you know, the issues that you've raised, we need to get those out wider.
Yeah.
Justice group. So I think rather than, I mean, any questions, we've got about a couple of minutes for questions to Helen now, but I think, you know, in terms of responding to you as a consultation, I think we'd, you know, that probably needs to be dealt with elsewhere or dealt with in a different kind of way, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, Chris, that's on my list anyway. So, you know, I'm already reaching out to the PPG. I just felt that the forum would also be, and tomorrow's forum as well, would be a good opportunity to reach out to the people that do attend these meetings.
And the issue you raised about buildings as well is a really pertinent one. My local surgery, we've now got a porta cabin out in the car park.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's, you know, yeah.
And also, you know, those issues aren't going to be solved overnight, are they? So I get that NHS England wants to have a PCN plan, but at the moment, everything seems to be labelled PCN matter, which is also not sustainable.
Okay. Any questions for Helen? Heather, where have you gone?
Just a very quick one, Helen. When you referred to the home visiting paramedics, is that the volunteers who occasionally come out and talk to various parish councillors who I know provide an incredibly valuable service, and certainly our parish council is very, very grateful.
We've got one standing behind Lynn, actually.
Oh, have we?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
He's even wearing his uniform.
Fantastic. So it is the same service.
No. So Heather, that's really great to hear. But we've got, you know, we employ paramedics, 2 paramedics and 2 nurses to deliver 113 hours of support across our patch. So typically how that works is a GP that hears from a patient that obviously needs a home visit will be signposting to that service through the morning. And actually the original intention of that pilot, when we did that a few years ago, was in partnership with the RUH, so that that patient could be seen, assessed, and if necessary referred to hospital and come home that same day, rather than that person, you know, waiting for the lunchtime or early afternoon GP visit when actually you'd almost run out of hours at that point. So it was introduced as an early home visit to try and overcome some of the issues that I've just described there. And actually it was so successful that we built on more hours so that GPs have got that access through the day to somebody that can do that home visit. That's not to say that they are not also doing their home visits, but it's just an extra, you know, clinical support that they can call on, and it's been really useful across Baines. So that's not just a Three Valleys thing, that's happening in Baines.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Denise, quick question from Denise, and then quick one from Vic.
Mine is also picking up on a note in the chat, which was Heather put in, there used to be counsellors located in GP practices, which took some work time away from the GPs. Is something being considered? And my issue is around mental health and support for mental health going forwards, because obviously that's a massive need now, and I'm hoping that to hear more about what provision there will be made for that.
That's a really good question. Yes, I haven't seen that in the chat. So I guess I can answer that in 2 ways. One, we've got social prescribers in practices now. So we've got 3 across our 9 practices, and they have come from a you know, really good background and have hit the ground running. Also, to a point, the care coordinators are picking some work up in terms of being able to signpost patients to the wealth of support that's available within our group. But I think to that specific point, now under the NHS England scheme, whereby we can recruit to specific roles, there is a mental health practitioner role. And we've actually put a request in for 2 within our whole area. But the problem is we just can't find those people at the moment. Now, the partnership should be within your locality with your mental health group. So for us, that's AWP, isn't it? So we're working with AWP and the CCG to try and identify the right people for these new roles without kind of robbing the system. Because, you know, we don't want to just take all of AWP's staff, because that wouldn't put us anywhere. But through Bath Mind, you know, there are some new initiatives being set up to also give us some extra support in practices. So I can link that work up with you afterwards, Denise. But I absolutely recognise, you know, the GPs in every surgery would have one in each if they really could. But I think it's finding the right people out there at the moment at the right level.
Absolute dearth of them at the moment, Helen. You're absolutely right. Real problem. Vic, quick question from you.
Yes, Helen, you've outlined a horrendously long inventory of considerations as a directive of implementing integrated care, so complicated that the ordinary man in the street won't be able to follow it. So it needs a very simplistic conclusion. You mentioned Hope House. How does anybody in the Chew Valley gain access to Hope House? That's in Radstock. So there's a lot of problems when you actually come down to the hard implementation of these conforming with integrated care directive. And it's just a very simplistic measure is how the ordinary individual patient gains access to a GP. They don't get home visits. You say about paramedic home visits, but that's not the same as a doctor doing home visits. And it's probably an old-fashioned trait, but that's what a lot of people would dearly love to be resurrected.
I'm glad you've mentioned that, because I think let's just unpick what you've said. There's a few things there, isn't it? So one, GPs are still doing home visits, so that's not going away. It's just that at the moment there are some patients that might need some clinical intervention that is not necessarily required a GP to do that. So in those cases, we would send a paramedic. And you know, in some cases, that might be where that patient is likely to be referred to hospital. So we just need a bit of a sense check on that. And there's no requirement for a GP to go in that situation. But what I'm not saying is that GPs have stopped doing home visits. So they absolutely have not. You kind of called out the complexity in the model that NHS England has asked us to roll out. You're absolutely right. And, you know, that we have to push back on this because, you know, we're also hearing that whatever we implement, there has to be a GP on site. Well, that's just ridiculous now that we are thinking about online consultations, that we are trying to be a bit more flexible in how we deliver care. Because the fact is, there aren't a ton of GPs out there to recruit. You know, we've tried it. We've got to think of some alternative measures that continue to be safe with GP supervision, but have to be sustainable. And I think, you know, the problem that we've got in our patch, in that we're a big rural geography, is the point that you've called out. You know, we can't operate hub working because it takes 40 minutes to go from Chew to Radstock. And if you haven't got a car and you can't drive, even worse. So, you know, it's my job to absolutely raise all of that up the line and try and present a model that works for the patient, because the patient's at the heart of this, as you rightly say, so that we've got a blend of extra hours that the practice can do and, you know, recognizing that they're already stretched, but also a bit of hub working, perhaps across 2 sites, where we can get the support from other staff employed by our GP federation. But I have to say that those other staff tend to be people that already work in practice. So we're kind of, you know, there is not an infinite pool of staff out there, which is the problem across the country, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
reply, Helen. It's more reassuring. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna call it there, if that's okay, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, Helen, for joining us. And I'm really pleased to see, who's that kissing the ashes behind your head? Which, because normally you put your screen.
Oh, I've got Stuart Broad and Michael Vaughan. So
wow.
After today's match, that's pertinent, isn't it?
Normally you have your screen on blur, so normally I can't see who they are. That's very good. Okay. I just want to say so thank you very much, everyone, for people who've spoken. I know we're 1 minute over time. There is a written update from the Chew Valley Climate and Nature Emergency Working Group, which just outlines the work they've been doing on Sustainable Transport Group and the Home Energy Group. We'll make sure that's sent out with the papers, if that's okay. The other thing I just wanted to say, so we've got our next meeting is coming up in Wednesday, the 21st of September. It's the forum's AGM. Was it going to be an actual meeting, Sarah?
Well, it's entirely up to the forum, really. The meetings, apart from the attendance tonight, the meetings have worked quite well virtually, saves people travelling.
Okay.
But if people do want to meet, we can arrange that. But
I
it's
just wondered, I mean, we're going to, as Alison is testament to, at the moment, we're entering another phase of
yes.
so no doubt we'll keep them online. Okay, well, look, let's keep it online. But I just wanted to say that this will be my last meeting as chair. I'm standing down as chair, and I'm not going to be seeking re-election. I've been doing it since 2015, which I reckon is for seven years now. So I think that's more than outstayed my welcome, and it's opportunity for someone else to step in. So we will be putting that out formally, but I just wanted to get it out to you guys now. So if you've got any hankering to stand as chair, and obviously with Heather is vice chair at the moment, and Heather have been in discussion about this, but it's a really, there's plenty of opportunity to have conversations with myself and Sarah and Heather and Alison about this, because it's really important. But please do let others know that is going to be happening. So it's not just I'm genuinely not standing next time. There's no one's going to twist my arm to make me stand again. It's just not happening. So I'm going to be handing the reins over to someone. So if you know of anybody or you want to do it yourself, then as I say, please do speak to Sarah, Heather, or myself, and we will make it as easy and as straightforward as possible. But you're a lovely bunch of people to work for anyway, or to try and chair. We do try and get the meeting. Look at that, 3 minutes late as well. That's terrible, isn't it? Chris, if Chris is still on the call, Axel will be cross with me for having run over by 3 minutes. So but thank you very much everyone for joining tonight. We get the notes out to everybody. We've got some briefing papers to go out to everybody. Helen,
just a quickie, I can see that there are some things in the chat, so perhaps if you
yes.
could just let me know so I can respond to those directly, that would be really helpful.
Liz,
thank you.
Liz, just clarification, Liz, did you mean a toe plan? Was that sort of some chiropody clinic that you were trying to set up, Liz?
Apologies, I think it came in unpredictive.
Okay.
It's simply
it could have been a toe plan.
But there you go.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll capture all those. Heather.
Yeah, just a quickie. Just that we need more people to join the working groups in terms of climate control and the other ones that are going desperately. And people don't need to be parish councillors, they just need to be anybody from the community with an interest. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Thanks for that. Okay, well, look, thank you very much, guys, for joining the call this evening. Thanks, Jackie, for joining us all the way from wherever you are. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Anna, Sarah. Sarah's gone. Lynn, yeah, everyone in Chew Magna, Sue, Vic, Denise, Andrew, Michaela, Chris, everyone. Thanks very much. And
thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.